Why can't Otani pitch this year? He'd be
Yeah,
the he'd be the ultimate midseason acquisition. The Dodgers will do anything to at this point. They've done weirder things before.
That feels like a pretty fraud plan.
Aaron Rodgers is playing football.
Closing games.
Aaron Rodgers is playing football less than a year after
I
Achilles tendon surgery. Modern science is
great,
is
and I'm
far
not betting.
beyond what it used to be.
And I'm not betting on the Jets to win the Super Bowl. Hello and welcome back to Dodgers Debate. I'm Jack Harris, the LA Times Dodger beat writer, along with Dylan Hernández, our sports columnist, and maybe Bill Plaschke later in the episode if his what was Bill's excuse?
he's got some kind of repairman at home.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
he
the
doesn't
story.
say for. I don't know what the guy's repairing.
All right. Well, I am in the concourse of Minute Maid Park here before the Dodgers series opener in Houston. So forgive the background noise. But Dylan, I think most times when the Dodgers come to Houston, the story would be about 2017. But right now, with the deadline coming up on Tuesday, that's kind of where a lot more of the spotlight is at. I think it's pretty clear, right? Like the Dodgers need reinforcements, whether it's with the pitching, there's obviously ways they can bolster the lineup. As you look at this team right now and as you look at the market, where do you think makes the most sense for the team to go? How big do they need to go this week? And what are you expecting to see leading up to Tuesday's deadline?
Here, I'll start with this, right? Which is that under this front office, in terms of guys that have been drafted and developed by this organization, been Will Smith, Walker Buehler, and kind of a bunch of guys we've forgotten about, and a bunch of guys who are up here who we'll probably forget about pretty soon. Looking at that track record, I would not be, because before there was kind of this idea like, hey, like we're going to be this like player development factory, whatever. That has not been the case, and I think it's one thing if you have evidence that you can do this, sure, hoard your prospects, right? Because that's how you build winning teams. But
Gavin Stone this year, I'd throw in that
category. Let's throw him in as a maybe. Okay. And so I would not be shy about just kind of dealing at this point. Again, we've talked about this last year, the fact that right, last year, the year before, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman in their primes together on the same team. Now you've added Otani to that mix. So I think you kind of have your investment in that window is that much greater. So I would do it all, man. I would, go out and get that front line started in Crochet.
Well,
Arozarena's off the market already, right?
Yes.
But I would try, sure, to lengthen that lineup too.
The only problem with that is this is a tough market if you're going to be doing the all-in thing, right? So unless you can convince the Tigers to deal Tarek Skubal, who I think most people look at as the most complete guy, pitcher that could potentially get traded, even though it seems pretty unlikely he's going to move. Then there's Garrett Crochet. He checks a lot of boxes, right? He's got high-end stuff. He's leading the American League in strikeouts, and he's the kind of guy that in an October environment, has the stuff that'll play that can, help you advance through rounds and save your bullpen and do all the things that the Dodgers haven't had enough of the last couple of years. The problem with him is that 2 years ago he had Tommy John. Last year he only threw 20 innings coming out of the bullpen. His career high is 54 innings, and this year he's already over 110. So you either need to give him some sort of break before the playoffs start. You would need to maybe put him in the bullpen or put him in some sort of swing role by the time you get to the postseason. Or you would have to do what he's reportedly asking teams, which is keep me on a normal starters routine. I think I can pitch through October. That's something he said at the All-Star game. Physically, how he feels, he thinks he can do that. But he reportedly wants a contract extension if he's going to do that or if he's going to be open to moving to the bullpen. So there's just a lot of layers here where, look, all other things being equal, I think it's a pretty legitimate discussion to have. Should the Dodgers be trading Dalton Rushing for this guy? Should they be trading some of their top pitchers for it? Because I think a guy who's as talented as he is with 2 years of control left, that's what it takes to get him. But the problem is, like a lot of other pitchers on this market, if he doesn't exactly fit what they need this year, if you trade for him, he's going to come with some risks down the road, depending on how you use him the rest of this year. And you might have to get a contract done on top of it. To me, this is why I think when it comes to the pitching market for the Dodgers, you're probably not going to be seeing an impact move there unless you count somebody like Jack Flaherty as an impact move. I think that's a fit for them and a guy that they've targeted in free agency and at trade deadlines before. And otherwise, because of all this, I think you either have to try to maybe bolster the bullpen or more likely do what you can to round out the lineup and make sure that even if the pitching is in an imperfect place by the time you get to October, that the lineup isn't going to fail you the way it has the last couple of years either. I think that's the easiest thing for the team to do between now and Tuesday. The question is, do you overpay a little bit for some of those marginal ads? Do you go all in to get a Luis Robert? We've already seen that Randy Arozarena went for not a small package, but definitely one the Dodgers could have matched, I think, with the players that they have. So that's where you're at right now with this team, which is, I think, for as much as they would like to add pitching, it's going to be difficult. And then the question becomes, how badly do they feel the need to bolster the lineup, bolster the bullpen, and find other ways to try to improve the roster before Tuesday?
Here's the thing, though. I agree that that's what they're going to do. That doesn't mean like getting pitching's like that difficult. Just trade Dalton Rushing. What's like the best? Okay. So Will Smith.
Well, I guess
Will Smith's future backup.
I guess my question to you is: do you think Garrett Crochet, with some of the limitations and the questions that he's going to have, checks that box? Because he's the only one. Like my guess is if Tarek Skubal's gettable, the Dodgers will give up what they need to give up to get that guy. Like he's the AL Cy Young front runner. He's got a couple years of control left. He doesn't have workload questions. I think all other things being equal, there would have been a consideration to maybe moving a Dalton Rushing for a Garrett Crochet. Now, I don't think the Dodgers had reached that point yet, and I think they were going to be reluctant to giving up, one of they have two top 100 prospects right now in MLB Pipeline's rankings, it's Dalton Rushing and Jose DePaula.
Go back and look at the history of those rankings. Those things are crap.
Well,
dude.
and that's true, but
here's the thing, right? There's kind of that Corey Seager type prospect where you're like, okay, this is like a potential MVP type guys. And sure, right, guys break into the league every year that kind of fit that mold. I don't think, at least, right, and I don't get the sense that there's anybody in their system that like fits that category right now. So I don't understand like why they're being so careful.
I think maybe Jose.
And here's the other part of this too, right? It's like, okay, all these like, right, okay, you go past like this, right? Sure, the risk goes up. It doesn't mean like it's good, like guy's guaranteed to break down when he reaches like a certain point, and yeah, like down the road, sure, can there be like ramifications? Of course they can be, but like, I mean, again, right, and we see Oral Hershiser every day, at the ballpark, and I bet you if you ask him, like, was it worth going through 88 and right, whatever came after that, like, absolutely it was, I don't think there's any question that was. So like, I don't know. To me, there's kind of, I understand like why you kind of need to be careful, and match things out here. But here's the thing about this, right? I think that the way that they're committed financially to certain guys, this is going to get ugly no matter what, right? I mean, because again, their model in theory,
like 4 or 5 years from now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that's the thing. Is like their model in theory was like, well, we're going to have all these guys coming up from the minor leagues, and right, we're going to have like this mix of like homegrown guys that are going to be cheap and augment. I think that was Friedman's word, right? Augment them with like free agents, whatever. Well, no, this is like a team that's like heavily reliant on free agents. This is going to get ugly at some point, And so I'm of the mind again, right? You have like this kind of 4 or 5 year window. Just go for it, man. Because so far, they have one championship. Look, and I'm not sure where Plaschke's on this. I just saw he signed in here, but I think whatever. Those were the rules that year. To me, that's like a legitimate thing. But there are a lot of people out there, I think, right, that kind of take a bit away from that World Series because it wasn't kind of the full season, the full whatever, and that is kind of all they have to show. For what has it been like 11, 12 years now that this front office has been here?
But as it pertains to this year, right, I think this is like the question with Crochet is that a guy, it's all the questions around him that you think seriously impacts their World Series chances?
Yes. Yeah, because I think the drop off after Glass now is so so steep, basically. They have no idea what they're going to get out of Yamamoto. You can't count on that, and this is like the way this is shaping up is that like it's almost like in like the stars, right? Like it's destined for the game to end, right? Or their season to end with Clayton Kershaw, ball in hand here. I mean, the guy's coming off like shoulder surgery. God bless him. He made it back, to this point, but it's going to end with, Kershaw in some kind of really compromised position. And then everybody blaming Dave Roberts at the end.
Yeah. Now they're not going to count on Kershaw, are they, Jack?
I mean, they might have to. The place they're at right now.
How can he defend not making a deal when that's what it's going to come down to?
It can't come down to that. And there's no way. I was there yesterday.
Jack.
But addressing that part of the roster is different, right? Like that's where you get down to, do you want Clayton Kershaw or do you want to get Eric Fetty? Do you want Clayton Kershaw or do you want Yusei Kikuchi, right? And those I think are, that's why a name like
No,
Jack
no, you
Flaherty.
address the top of the rotation so that it doesn't even get down to that.
Well, sure, but like this is just a bad market to do that. Like Crochet's the only guy, and I think Crochet, frankly, comes with as many questions as a lot of their other pitchers do, right? Like he's Glasnow times two because he's trying to make an even bigger jump than Glasnow did, and
Well,
that's
isn't he
why,
also saying he's got to get an extension, Crochet?
right? And so that's the other layer of this now, where I think this is the difficult spot they're in because I think you can make an argument against, trading for Crochet and taking on the unknowns and the risk, especially if you're going to have to give him an extension. At the same time, right? Like that's the position that they're in where you kind of have to take those risks. You have to go out and maybe hope that he clicks or hope that a Jack Flaherty clicks because otherwise, what you guys were saying, I think the path outside of that is you're relying on a banged up Yamamoto coming back. You're relying on a diminished Clayton Kershaw. You're relying on Walker Buehler or Bobby Miller to have some midseason resurgence. And yeah, those aren't great options either. But to me, and that's not defending this, but I think those are the kind of things that, based on the way the Dodgers have approached trade deadlines before, based on the way this market is shaping up with the prices that some of these guys are going to cost, I would not be surprised if the team maybe adds one starting pitcher to the mix and just trusts that maybe we can count on Clayton Kershaw in the postseason. Maybe we can count on Bobby Miller or Walker Buehler to give us some production in the postseason. To me, that's where this is heading. I don't think that's the best option, but it is one that within the dynamics of this market, I think if there were more obvious top guys to go get, I think you would see the Dodgers being more aggressive. But because they're in this gray area right now, are there guys that are really impact arms that we can get, and can we trust them to pitch the rest of the season? I'm not going to be surprised if they make no big moves here in the next week as it pertains to the pitching staff.
Well, we know they're not going to do anything, right? I mean, this is kind of and I almost feel like, Jack, that's kind of what you're kind of arguing, right? It's like, well, look at them, look at their history. That doesn't mean we can't sit here and say that they should do this.
But now,
right?
I asked Doc yesterday whether Clayton's performance would affect trade deadline. He said it would not. So it sounds like Doc wants to get somebody. Wants a top end starter.
He wants to win. Like, if you want to win, you will do something. I'm bothered by the fact that that Jack here has been indoctrinated to the point where he's just kind of accepting. You've accepted losing, Jack.
I mean, I think
champions.
To cut through some of this, like I think if you don't end up with a guy that's at least starting playoff games for you, now maybe it's a game 3 or a game 4 starter, but if you don't come out of this deadline with somebody who's starting games for you, that's putting way too much faith in the internal options they have and hoping that guys are going to come back. Like that's setting your pitching staff up in a spot for failure. Now, whether that means you get a Garrett Crochet or whether that means you get somebody who's not quite as good, but you hope can maybe give you some innings in the postseason, I think that's where the arguments are a little bit more valid with the way this market is going. But yeah, if you don't make a real starting pitching addition, I think that's going to be a problem.
But you can't do like Lance Lynn 2.0, right? Like a Flaherty or a Kikuchi,
I would do a Flaherty. I'd argue that.
You're
I
going
think Flaherty's fine.
I think the argument would be is that it's like a Lance Lynn plus, right? Like I think if you're trying to describe what they're looking for at this deadline, like that feels like a natural place for them to look. Unless
here's the thing,
like you're saying,
those types of guys, you feel comfortable sending them out on a Tuesday night to go face the Rockies. I do not feel comfortable sending any of those guys out to go face like the Phillies, right? I mean, to me, those are two completely different, in Citizens Bank Park. That's a whole different discussion, I think.
So, like when you look at the market this year, do you basically look at, okay, Garrett Crochet, maybe Jack Flaherty, those are the only like upgrades to the staff. Otherwise, you're just kind of adding guys that are about as good as Kershaw or some of the others that they're going to have pitching for them.
Yeah, I'm not I don't know. I'm not even really that in on Flaherty, to be honest.
I think Flaherty's got a whole new attitude. He's pitching his butt off for a bad team. He's had a great year. So what do you all see as the?
But I guess
what do you see as the ceiling for Kershaw? That's a question. After yesterday, what do you see as the ceiling? I see him as a 4 starter, maybe.
Sure. Like a guy who can navigate a regular season, give you 5 or 6 innings to start, and you're hoping that, in like a game 3 or 4 playoff series, can get you.
You're up 3-1.
He comes in. 12 to 15 outs at some point in the game, I think is probably how you look at it. And
But
they
see,
have
I
a lot
think
of guys like that right now.
Well, I think right, and I mean, for the better or worse, the one thing about Kershaw is he's not afraid, right? He's going to take the ball. Doesn't matter what the condition of his arm is. Doesn't matter like what's going on. And I kind of have a feeling that that willingness to take the ball and that fearlessness almost is going to kind of like elevate him to a point, right, into a responsibility that he might not be at this point physically capable of shouldering. And that to me is kind of the concern here, right? Is that like, again, if
I don't think they'll be suckered again, are they? They're not going to
Well,
be
it's not.
suckered
Is
again.
it suckering or is it like kind of setting a guy up to be like scapegoated? Because I mean, the truth is if because keep in mind too, like it won't just be this trade deadline where right if they don't go out and kind of get an impact on them, it won't just be this trade deadline that they passed on. Right, it was before the season too. You know, Burns was out there, the guy that pitched the no hitters was out
Me,
there, Cease was out there, right? So
that's where the mistakes have been made.
right,
Was
and
not
so
anticipating that guys
right.
could get
And like,
hurt.
let's be honest, professional sports a big game of cover your butt, right? And like, you put Kershaw in, it'll be like, oh, look what happened to Kershaw again in October, or whatever. I mean, never mind the fact that he's like really old now and coming off like major shoulder surgery. The headline is the headline, right? And you know, I just think I don't know. To me, I'm just kind of wondering here is how much of this is just going to be like deflection of blame at this point. They can't do anything. Okay, we're probably not going to make it now. How do we kind of position ourselves to like survive this thing with the less damaging PR hit possible?
All right, how much were they caught off guard with the Rosarina going to Seattle?
I don't think they were caught off guard. They had talked to Tampa Bay about a Rosarena, but at no point did it seem like they had really lined up on the kind of prospect package it would take to get him. And I think they also looked at Randy again on the position player side of this market. You're in a similar boat. They looked at Randy as a guy that, has obviously had some really good seasons as a big leaguer, has had some really good postseason as a big leaguer, but this year was having a bad season and might not have been enough of an upgrade for them to part with, prospects that they liked. And to me, like that whole situation is kind of a signal of like how they're approaching this deadline. Like Randy Rosarena is going to be one of the better bats that's moved, in the next week. But he's still a guy that's been batting around 200 this season, and for the potential he has, I think a team like the Dodgers, it's easy for them to also look at and say, all right, is he really that big of an upgrade over an Andy Pages or Miguel Vargas? And the answer to that is yes, but for the price, like Tampa, talking to people around the industry, like got a decent haul for where Randy was at right now. They got like two real prospects, not like top great end prospects, but like two real guys. And the fact that the Dodgers, again, talked about it and were in on him, but weren't willing to go that far. It's again a reflection of like the talent, how they view the talent on this market. If there's not going to be a lot of guys, I think, that line up with the prices that they're going to go for. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I think it's a continuation of a philosophy that has continually kind of limited the Dodgers' ceilings once you get to the postseason, right? Like they're
They always
preserving,
they think they're the smartest guys in the
right.
room.
They're trying to preserve the long-term options for, over trying to maximize the total talent you could have in any one year. It's something that pretty clearly at this point, right? It's like we've talked about all year. There is a window now. If there's a time you're going to go all in, it's in this season or next season or the one after. Like you can't waste these years. And, if there was if there were better players on the market, I think the team would have been more aggressive or would be more aggressive. And they still might be. But just with where things are at right now, I have a hard time seeing them making a ton of big moves at this point.
Let me ask you, Jack, how much has Lux's recent hot streak saved his roster spot?
I mean, a little bit, on the flip side, it might be making him more attractive to teams that are looking for, younger players to try to get back in trades. So I think what's helped it mostly is the fact that Miguel Rojas is hurt now, that Max Muncy remains sidelined, in the short term. Freddie Freeman left the team today to go back to LA to attend to a family matter because one of his sons has been in the hospital sick. And suddenly, like somebody like Lux is probably a net positive player for them because his bat has heated up the last week and he has been able to fill in. But again, this gets to like this roster right now is in such a it's in a difficult place to judge where do you trust that Max Muncy's coming back? Do you trust that some of the pitchers are coming back? Those are the dynamics around how the team is approaching the deadline right now. And if
I'm so sick of them always trusting They always trust every year. This time they trust, and it
Well,
always blows up in their face.
and it's trust coupled with, about like not wanting to overpay deadline prices and potentially lose out on trades. Like that's how they operate. Now, I'll ask you guys, like again, like what is the version of this deadline that you think would change that? Is it doing a Crochet Luis Robert deal? Would that kind of satisfy what you're looking for? Because I do think the it's easy to say like yes, they need to go out and get a bunch of players. This deadline makes it tricky. So like what is that ideal version of what they would do in the next week in your mind?
Ideally, they need a Trey Turner, Max Scherzer kind of deal. This team is that far away from winning the championship that they need a position player and they need a frontline starter. And I think anything less than that is a deadline failure.
Yeah, and to go back to what you were asking earlier, Jack, I mean, I guess, yeah, that Crochet Robert thing is probably as right.
That's good. I'd do that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as of
See,
the
I
one,
mean,
I don't know if it's, what else is out
just to
there,
me, right. And this is where, not to defend inaction at the deadline, because I think it's pretty clear the team needs to try to address some of the like the obvious holes that they have. But even like a Crochet Robert deal, Robert has an injury history. Crochet's got the workload questions. A deal like that, you probably have to give up somebody like rushing, maybe one of your top pitchers like a Rick Ryan or somebody like that. And I can understand the argument where you say, we don't want to gut our farm system for a trade that might not make us better in the short term and leave us even more hamstrung in the long term. And I think those are the debates that are happening within the front office right now. But yes, when you take a step back, this is the danger, is you still need to do something, right? Like you still need to make a couple moves to the lineup. I think the bullpen is interesting. If you feel like we can't fix the rotation, let's go get a couple other top bullpen arms to try to give us some coverage in the playoffs. Like obviously a patchwork pitching plan in October isn't great, but it might be better than relying on Clayton Kershaw to make normal starts or Walker Buehler to make normal starts. To me, like Dylan mentioned earlier, the position that they're in now is really a reflection of them not having done more in the offseason, in spring training, when Dylan Cease got traded, when Blake Snell signed, when Willie Adames might have been gettable in the trade. Like there were other things. Like the problems they have now, I think, were rather foreseeable. The fact that their pitching would get banged up and shortstop would remain a question, and the outfield would need to be supplemented because the young players haven't emerged as real everyday options. Like those were things I think you could have
I'll be right back.
foreseen. Okay, those are things I think you could have foreseen back at the start of the season, address them back then in the winter. And because you haven't, you're in this place now where it's not a great deadline. It might make more sense because it might make more sense to just hold on to some of your talent now, try to make smaller, cheaper moves to round out the roster. But that's an unfortunate place to be in for a team that spent $1.5 billion this winter, that should have been in a position to, more like the Phillies right now, where you're just kind of trying to add a few bonus pieces to round out what you have. Instead, the Dodgers feel like they need more fundamental changes. And to me, like, I just don't know if you can accomplish that in this deadline, even if you did like a Crochet Robert.
Jack, do you think there's any chance the Giants trade Snell to the Dodgers?
I think there's a chance they trade Snell, although I personally find it unlikely. And I think it's all the more unlikely that it's to the Dodgers. There's the player option. Well, there's the intra-division rivalry trading that for a guy who's already on the hot seat, like farm anxiety.
Right.
I think, like, I have a tough time seeing the logic in them trading Snell at all when you have a GM who's could very easily get fired at the end of the season. And if you trade Snell, you're basically punting on the rest of this year, unless you're getting, MLB quality bats back in return, which I don't think the Dodgers can really give them. And then he also has this player option where, the Dodgers are particularly wary of player options with guys. This is part of why they didn't get Snell when they did show some interest in him back at the end of spring, because Snell and his agent Scott Boras wanted a player option, and the Dodgers are reluctant to give those things, especially with the kind of money, even on a short-term basis, that Snell and Boras were asking for. So I don't think it's impossible. I find that pretty unlikely. And I think like this is one of the other challenges is I think the Dodgers could have explored that if it was more realistic. I think they could have explored like a Nathan Eovaldi had the Texas Rangers continued to fall in the standings, but they don't look like they're going to be a seller now. Had the Tigers been further out of it or just in a different place, I think Tarek Skubal would have been a much more realistic possibility and one that I think the Dodgers would have been willing to part with a lot of prospects for. But just things haven't really broken for them in that way.
Plus,
Well,
the
Dylan,
question I just asked Jack was, do you think there's any chance the Giants trade Blake Snell to the Dodgers?
I don't know if I like him or not.
Hmm.
Although he's pitched better lately.
Two-time Cy Young winner.
And
Yeah,
he was
but
pitching great in the World Series until Cash pulled him.
Until Austin Barnes saved the day.
yeah, that's true. That's true. I don't think that the Giants would never trade him here, would they?
Yeah, I don't think so, but that's
don't
kind of
think
what
so.
I wanted to just kind of throw out there. I mean,
And I
that
don't even
said,
think
kind of one of
they'd
these
trade
new
him at
age
all.
GMs who, right, they seem to be a little bit more open to this kind of stuff. Whereas like 20, right, even like when Ned was in charge, like there's no chance that this is going to happen.
I mean, is he gonna is Andrew gonna make a trade with Farhan really, and let Farhan get over on him? I don't
Well,
think so.
I wonder if it's the other way around at this point.
Right.
With Farhan's jobs.
Because Farhan might be in trouble. If he punts on the season, that could be the end for him over there. So,
Okay, let me ask you guys one thing. If the Dodgers don't make a huge move, right? Say they just add an outfield bat, they add a reliever, they add a mid-level starter. How optimistic or pessimistic are you about their World Series chances?
Dave Roberts has basically said they don't have a World Series team. He's basically said they need help. I agree with him. I don't think they're a World Series team. I don't think they're playing chicken with the starting pitcher again. And we've seen it happen the last 2 years, and it just happens once, shame on them. It happens twice, shame on you. So yeah, so I don't see it.
yeah, to me, it just kind of looks like, right, with the pitching, it just seems like they bought like a bunch of kind of lottery tickets and hope like three of them would hit, you know. And what I think is really like a killer is probably what they viewed as one of the sure ones, right? Bobby Miller. I mean, at this point, he's literally not a major league pitcher at this point, right? And obviously with Bueller, it kind of went the way it went. We've seen again, yeah, like hypothetically, if guys kind of get on a roll at the right time, like can it happen? Sure, right? I mean, we have seen Yamamoto pitch. It has happened before. Now, with the ramp up that he's gonna be right, he's gonna probably have like a month basically to kind of get ready for this thing. With Kershaw again, right, in his situation, Bueller kind of feels like again that ticket's almost, if this were a horse race, you'd be chucking the ticket halfway through the race basically at this point. Miller, I'm not really sure you can count on. The fact that like at this point, no, it does look, like Stone is probably like a guy, right? Like, oof.
Yeah, but that's the thing. We're talking about Stone, like we talked about Miller last year, right? We were relying on a rookie. You saw what Miller did in the postseason. Stone's the same fears about Stone. I don't trust anybody. I don't even trust Glass now.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even gotten to that point yet, right? I mean, I am being very generous, I think. Kind of like, okay, just kind of bestowing Glass now with this, this like ace label because, I mean, his playoff history kind of is what it is too, right? It's not, he hasn't exactly cloaked himself in glory either in October. So, now I think kind of you have to go at this point with the assumption that he's a guy because if not, then it looks like really bleak. But I agree with Plash. I don't think that's necessarily, if we're going to be honest, that's a given either.
I think a best case scenario, they enter the playoffs like the 22 team did, which was a team that had Julio Urias at the top of the rotation. It wasn't like, in the conversation for best pitcher in baseball, but had a really good year and got Cy Young votes. I think that's like this year's class now. You had Clayton Kershaw, who was the number 2 in that rotation coming off an all-star year. I think that's kind of like your Gavin Stone. You're going to be banking on Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Remember in that year, Tony Gonsolin was like coming back from a late season injury. I think that's the equivalency there. And then you're going to need a lot out of your lineup and your bullpen to help cover some of that stuff, which they obviously didn't get in 22. Now, that said, when they went into the 22 postseason, I think we were all somewhat confident that they could advance a couple rounds and maybe contend for a series. But even that team felt a little bit flawed. And I think that's just kind of the frustration you have to have if you're a Dodgers fan right now, right? Is for all the work they did on this team and all the work they did this offseason to be back in such a familiar situation where you have a flawed roster and you don't have easy answers to fix it and sure, if everything goes right, we still could win a World Series, but there's so many obstacles and other things that could go wrong between now and October that that's where it's difficult. Because I do think there's a world in which this core of a team without a major upgrade does piece it together and figure out how to at least win a pennant and get to the World Series.
I said this on the last time we had this Dodger debate. Watch out for the Phillies. They're not even in the same class as the Phillies, and we saw that on the field.
Sure.
I don't know what makes them think they can go into the postseason the same lineup they threw against the Phillies last week.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's not impossible, but it's unlikely. And while I can't, probably not as much as it sounds like you two guys will, it's hard for me to fault the front office as much for not doing a ton at this deadline because, again, this is just such a kind of imperfect market for them. But when you look at the whole of this season, the fact that they are back in the spot and don't have a lot of options or ways to fix some of their biggest problems, it's a concerning place to be, and one that I think hangs over the rest of what happens this season, barring them making some surprise move.
Well, here, Dylan, you wrote about this. I'm curious about this. Why won't Ohtani say something? It's incumbent on Ohtani to say something, to push them, to nudge them. He's got the power. He's got the juice. Why can't he use it?
I think it's twofold. One, after he signed in the winter, they did go out and spend money, right? So far, I think, at least in his experience with them, and I think most of us are like this, right? I kind of generally judge people based on how they treat me, So based on that, I think the team has the benefit of the doubt in his eyes, and two, there is this major cultural hurdle here, right? Where in Japan, you have a chain of command, and that never gets subverted. I mean, it's completely unheard of for a player to go to management and say, hey, you got to do this. Now, I do think that is probably in Ohtani's future if they don't win this year, maybe next year, because at some point, this guy is very legacy driven. And I do think winning a World Series is important to him and how he views his legacy. And, we saw it in Anaheim a few years ago, right? When, the team was unraveling in September, and he said something along the lines of, as much as I like it here, my feelings of wanting to win are stronger. And, that wasn't as calculated as, say, the statements that he made about wanting to play in the LA Olympics during All-Star Week. That, he just snapped, I think. But I wouldn't be surprised, again, if he's now 32 years old and he's more than anybody cognizant of where he is physically, and if he starts to feel, hey, my time's running out here, and if these guys keep doing this every year, we're not going to go anywhere. It really wouldn't shock me if he just kind of, again, snapped and made some kind of statement like that.
Why can't Ohtani pitch this year? He'd be the ultimate midseason acquisition. Heck, I saw Dr. Elatrosh yesterday. He's a miracle worker. Why can't he work a miracle here?
Hey, he looks great on flat ground. Then again, I was saying the same thing about Kershaw a few months ago, right? I was like, hey, this guy looks tremendous right now. And not to say that Clayton didn't look good, the other day, but it's still a ways away, right?
That feels like would be another lottery ticket.
I kind of feel like he could close.
I do too. I think I don't think that's. I don't think we can write that off.
The problem is that they're tied to this guy for 10 years.
Yeah,
at 70 per. Granted, it's deferred or whatever, but
baseball decision makers are not that creative these days, I'm afraid, unless it's putting an opener in front of Julio Urias.
Yeah, but then again, hey, you remember we got the guy here whose idea it was for Kershaw to come out and close that series against the Nationals. Remember that, Plash?
I remember it. I asked Robert.
That was literally Plash. And Farhan at the time thought, what the hell is this guy talking about? So he saw what the front office couldn't. So you know what?
I'm telling you,
the answer right there.
Don't count it out. Don't count them out. The Dodgers will do anything at this point. They've done weirder things before. Don't count them out. I'm just telling you. I'm saying right now.
That feels like a pretty fraught point.
Aaron Rodgers is playing football.
Closing games.
Aaron Rodgers is playing football less than a year after Achilles tendon surgery. Modern science is
great, and I'm
far
not betting,
beyond what it used to be.
And I'm not betting on the Jets to win the Super Bowl.
Well, here's the thing. I believe in Dr. Elatrosh, and I believe that Ohtani could do it. I
do
just
too.
don't think there's I just don't think. I mean, we know this front office. They're not gonna do it, right?
I don't
And
know.
worst comes,
I'm just
worst
saying.
comes, Uncle Cass is gonna come in and just like squash the plan anyway.
I'm just putting it out there. Just putting it out there.
Well, I like it. It's just, these are the kind of ideas that
Who would you
when
rather
you
have
have
close
a
games?
flawed roster.
Evan Phillips, Putty, or Shohei Otani?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? If the
That's
world,
actually
if we knew that the world would
but I
end,
don't think it's Otani.
we knew that if the world would end at the end of this, right? At the end of this season, the world was going to end. You go with Otani for sure. The problem is that there are a few years.
Well, Dylan, you always write like the world's going to end.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. It does end every October. It feels like.
Hey, this is some real Dodger debate here. This lives up to the name of the show.
I actually think that if the world was going to end, we're probably not playing baseball games in October. There'd be bigger priorities to deal with than is Shohei Otani going to make a miraculous ninth inning save appearance for the Dodgers. But we're going to get out of here before you guys start debating about the name of the show again. So we'll be back next week after the trade deadline with, I'm sure, plenty of thoughts about what the Dodgers did or most likely didn't do. In the meantime, for Dylan and Bill, I'm Jack Harris. Thanks for watching, and
Thank you, guys.
we'll see you next time.
See ya.